Apparently, all it takes for Ohio State to make news is for me to leave town, but I'm back now, and I've got a lot on my mind for a little Talkin' Tuesday on the Podcast Daily with Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We don't actually have a press conference scheduled today, but let's act like there was one, Bill. Like, it's been a quiet-ish stretch. We're now into the latter half of February. Ohio State has made some coaching moves. Obviously, the biggest one on Wednesday of last week with Matt Patricia. You guys broke that down very well over the last couple of days on the podcast while I was gone. Of course, I have some thoughts about that, but if we had coaches or early enrollees or transfer players, you can ask anything. What is most on your mind right now about Ohio State?
There's a lot. I don't know. Like, I'll let you say your thoughts on Patricia, because people are probably tired of hearing me talk about it. I think I'm still very interested / intrigued / like, I don't know, mildly confused, though I think I get it on the hire of Tyler Bowen and like just him not having coached offensive line for so long. And like, I understand that he like is an offensive lineman, so maybe that's enough. But it's like it was a bit of a swerve, I think, by Ryan Day to go that direction. I do think it makes sense, if you look at it from the coordinating perspective and what Tyler Bowen's expertise appears to be in terms of run game and RPO and his background and the people that he's been with. And you and I also talked about, there's some stuff with him, how he's developed tight ends that I think you could take and apply to the offensive line position, or frankly, any position that Tyler Bowen has coached, and think that he can probably develop it pretty well. But Ryan Day still took a swing on an offensive line coach, like who was not coaching the offensive line. And I just find that very interesting. So I have, I don't know, a million questions about that and how you evaluate it and what he thinks that might look like and sort of the impact that he thinks Tyler Bowen might have on the field. I think it's clear that he's probably, Berm can speak to it more than I can, but I just feel like he's going to probably give him some more recruiting juice, and that's great. But I want to know about like the offensive line development piece more specifically, because that's a little harder to get at when there's just not a whole lot of data out there to look at, because he really only coached the position for 1 year.
I think that he's going to give them that recruiting juice you're talking about, and that's ultimately what led to the hire being made the way it was, and maybe why Ryan Day did swerve a little bit and go a different direction than probably anticipated, because initially we all thought in a more veteran coach, someone that had been around the block a little bit. But he's going to get to that recruiting boost only after Ohio State addresses with recruits the question that kids are going to have, which is, this guy hasn't coached the offensive line in 7 years. How is he going to develop me? Because personality is there. Tyler Bowen, talking to recruits and offensive linemen around the country, has made a big impression on kids in the first 2 weeks that he's been working on behalf of Ohio State. But there is that underlying question that keeps popping up, like, well, he hasn't coached the offensive line in 7 years. How do I know what I'm going to be developed into? And so I think the question that I would have Tyler Bowen in the offensive line is, who's working with him? And that is something that it's weird, because we've spent so much time talking about these 10 assistants and who they're going to be. And now we're like, okay, but who's the assistant and who's the grad assistant? Because like, you can do that now. And I think that more than ever, you're going to see Ohio State be strategic in putting the front facing guys being the real personable recruiting guys. And then you're going to have the professional coaches, the guys that are gritty, long-term, in the dirt type of guys, the X's and O's guys behind the scenes. And I think that that's going to be a fun chemistry to try to watch Ryan Day figure out, because for Tyler Bowen, like, the kids love him so far from what I understand and what I hear, but other schools are using that against Ohio State. And I want to know how Ryan Day is going to combat that. I
feel like I should have known better that the thing that was on Bill's mind in the late February was offensive line.
Always. I am who I am.
Yeah. Do you have something different that's on your mind, Burr?
I mean, it's the quarterbacks. Is it too early for a quarterback controversy? Is it too early for a
controversy?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a controversy.
You're taking it that far, huh?
Until you have a guy picked, it's a controversy, because there's always going to be two very distinct sides to the argument. I'm sure there's going to be a very pro Julian Sayin side of things. I'm sure there's going to be a pro Lincoln Keenholz side of things, and there's going to be a handful on the lunatic fringe who want to talk about Tavian St. Clair as the starter for this team. So I want to know how you figure it out. How does Billy Fessler, a guy heading into this spring with Brian Hartline as new offensive coordinator and play caller, with all these changes, you're losing Riley Larkin in the quarterback room as well as Chip Kelly. Ryan Day did not spend nearly as much time last year with the quarterbacks as he has in his previous years at Ohio State. So maybe he doesn't have as much of a feel for them as he would otherwise. I just think that there's so many questions that are going to be raised. And this is not a situation where, like, I thought with Devin Brown and Will Howard last spring, we went into that knowing that you were going to see pretty good play out of both of them, I think. And I don't know that we should have that expectation for when we get a chance to watch spring practice, to see those guys coming out looking like presumptive starters and playing clean ball. I think it's going to be kind of sloppy at times. And I think it's going to be, maybe more than any point in Ryan Day's tenure, a learn on the job type of deal for the quarterbacks, because there's nobody coming in. There's nobody coming in to change the tenor of the room. So yeah, I mean, I think the upside is there for Julian. I think obviously Lincoln's been there for a couple of years and should know the offense, and physically looks great. Looks like $1 million, but is he ready to be a full-time quarterback? How do you decide? Like, quarterback play is always the thing that if Bill's the offensive line thinker, all I ever think about is how do the quarterbacks prepare? Because this is a different, it's a far different experience than Ryan Day's had at his time at Ohio State. Even if we go back to 2019, you didn't know exactly what you had with Justin Fields because he'd only played like 40 snaps or something like at Georgia as a freshman, but you knew what he could be. And I don't know how these guys fit into this offense, and that's going to be fascinating.
See, can I ask you guys what you think about Fessler? Sorry to cut you off, Austin, but good. Like it is just an interesting dynamic that you touched on there, Brim, that like they're breaking in a brand new starter. There's like really nobody in that room that has much experience, and he's not a first-time quarterbacks coach, but he's a young quarterbacks coach who's doing this for the first time. He's also the first Ohio State quarterback coach who actually played quarterback since Mike Yurcich in 2019, so that probably helps. But I like does the fact that like the coach of that position is new give you any pause, or like are you excited about Billy Fessler? Like what's your early read on him, I guess?
Well, I think that it's tied up into the number one thing that I'm thinking about, which is the entire structure of the offense. And if Ryan Day, this is not about who's calling plays on Saturdays. I am wondering how much more labor intensive, time sensitive, time demands are going to be on Ryan Day's plate, not just for the quarterback specifically, not because of Billy Fessler specifically, not because of Tyler Bowen specifically, not because of Brian Hartline specifically, all of them wrapped up into one. Because I think when this decision was made with Matt Patricia, I think the shift from, all right, you're ready to make Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton co-defensive coordinators. I think when the Chip Kelly departure happened, I think that shifted and changed some of the duties that Ryan Day was going to be putting on his own plate. And I think that there were conversations that were had in the Woody, in the Fawcett Center about what you might need. And when it became like an experienced defensive coordinator, I think in some form or fashion, and I don't know what percent to assign to it, and I think that is why it is another question, I think, for Ryan Day, was like, if you are going to have to be more involved than you thought, because Chip Kelly has gone on offense, but you also like certain things about Billy Fessler and his potential and his upside. If you have full faith and trust in Brian Hartline, but you're not, 100% sure about how that's going to work out, because that's a first-time opportunity. If you have a new face coming in to lead the offensive line and handle that, I think Ryan Day has to be more involved and is going to be more involved. But to what extent, I don't know. I know that your question was about Billy Fessler specifically, and it ties into what Berm is talking about with first-time starters. But like, I've seen and heard so many things about Fessler going on a half dozen years that I didn't even bat an eye. I just expected that promotion was going to happen. I think that the communication, the relationship, the schematic knowledge, I think all of that lines up where I don't really have any concern there. And when Berm was talking about going back to 2019, I think probably if the recruiting profiles are similar, which they are, the athletic traits are not quite identical between Justin Fields and Julian Sayin. I feel like Sayin is probably in a little bit better position going into year 2 at Ohio State than Justin Fields was, and getting thrown into, yes, he had all of spring. That did look rough, but he was ready by week 1. And it was like, oh, well, why did we spend all this time wondering if this first time starting quarterback in year 2 like could actually make it happen? It's not to diminish any of that. I'm trying to take parts of, I haven't talked in 5 days about Ohio State, and you guys have all the things that like have been on my mind, brought them up already. And so this is not one specific answer to any of that, but I think my mind goes straight to the top with Ryan Day, as it always does. If Bill's going to talk about the offensive line and Berm's going to talk about quarterbacks, I'm going to look at Ryan Day and his influence on the entirety of the program. And I do think that his job description is going to be different this year than it was a year ago. And I wonder how much of that surprised him, how much of it was by design, how much of it changed over the last 6 weeks. Because when Berm and I talked to him, he was still in the midst of this for the interview that aired on Friday. And like, it seemed like all of this was heading down that road, but even Matt Patricia was, I think, a little bit out of left field even at that point, based on what we thought might happen. So, how much of this for Ryan Day as he charts 2025 is going to be different, not just from a year ago, but different than he may have thought a month ago?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at. Like it's just like how many different directions offensively might Ryan Day be pulled in because of the dynamics on the coaching staff. Like he's gonna have to like coach the coaches a little bit, I think, more than maybe he had to this past season, and that's fine. Like that, I think that's part of his job description, especially this time of year. It's fine. It just like puts a little bit of pressure on him, I guess, to make sure that everything gets to the point where it's as good as it possibly can be before August 30th. Because if he's still doing all that stuff once the games kick off, then I could see that being a little wonky. But I also think like the coaches they have are sharp and young, and I'm not anticipating it being an issue, but it is a very different dynamic.
Yeah, if I can just put a pin in the Fessler thing, I think that's one of the reasons why promoting him was easily our first thought when the Chip Kelly stuff happened, because he was the guy that was there last year. So if you're looking for a little bit of continuity in a room that's completely turning over, he's the guy that has it. He's the guy that worked a lot with those quarterbacks hand in hand, while Chip and Ryan were working with Will Howard on game plan stuff. And, Billy was more of the guy doing the hands-on stuff with the depth. So I think that actually is the one area where I'm kind of more comfortable with Billy, because he's already worked with those guys and knows who they are, as opposed to someone else coming in and doing it.
I am surprised that Berm is calling it a controversy already, because they have.
I mean, I just like
even
to
practice.
I just really like to drum up intrigue. I'm a huge fan of clickbait. I love media clickbait, and just really big on sensationalism.
That's true. Homer Berm does love clickbait. It's just he lives for it. It's his lifeblood. And
he said what?
Just put that on a graphic. I think the other part that ties into this is the completion of the staff and like the Larry Johnson factor of it all. I mean, unless something happened that when I was disconnected from the world, like it's been a week and a half, two weeks since, they got off the road and Ryan Day and Larry Johnson had a conversation about the future, and, wait and see who's going to be that last piece. Can that work together? I don't know how long that takes to come to a decision. And I also, and I've said many times, like it's the middle of February. There doesn't have to be like a real rush to get it done, but spring ball is going to start in a month. So you do have to finalize it at some point. So I don't know if that's going to transpire all this week. I mean, we're not expecting there to be any press conferences until maybe next week with early enrollees and maybe some veterans, and then the week after that with the coaching staff before spring break, whenever that's final. So I guess maybe by then we'll know for sure. But like, I don't know. Do you think it'll be this week, Bill, or what do you think will shake out there?
I think we'll have some resolution by the end of this week. Just kind of feels right. I don't have a lean either way. You guys might know or have more of a lean than I do. I guess like what I would say is that like I would be surprised that if Larry Johnson decided he wanted to retire that like Matt Patricia would just coach the defensive line. Like I think like Ohio State would have to go out and hire a defensive line coach. Maybe that's an obvious thing to say, but I just like Patricia, I guess, has coached defensive line. He's kind of coached every position on both sides of the ball. But I don't know that Ryan Day necessarily wants that out of his coordinator. Like I think they landed on something pretty good last year with Jim Knowles being detached from a specific position, and they'd like to maintain that moving forward. So I guess if Larry decided he wanted to retire, then it kind of like restarts this thing all over again. And now we're wondering who's going to be the new defensive line coach. But I guess like step one of that, I would assume we know one way or the other by the end of this week.
Yeah. The only thing I'm reluctant to say is that we'll know for sure about anything because I don't think that there's a guarantee that we would know for sure before spring ball. I think that there's, I mean, I'll just be that guy. I think it's totally up in the air. Larry could decide at the end of spring if he was, after he sees how things look and how the defense looks. I mean, I think that that's just as likely as locking in a firm decision by, next week or by the time spring ball starts. But that's, I think we're entering such a unique timeline of college football where the old rules and standards, I think, are just gone. I mean, we watched a position coach at Ohio State leave for Michigan in the middle of spring break last year. So
yeah,
spring break in Ann Arbor is great. So
yeah, I'm just reluctant to say anything we know for sure because I just don't think that anyone would know for sure.
Yeah, the old me would just be absolutely shuddering at that notion that could happen after spring or during spring. How are you going to hire somebody? But guess what? I just saw that happen last year and it worked out great for Ohio State. Carlos Loughlin's like, sure, I'll leave in the middle of spring practice for Ohio State and Oregon, and Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are going to be just fine with that. And it was a smashing success. So guess what? As you said, Berm, the calendar's changed. You can now hire and fire, retire, any of those things at any point in the calendar because college football never stops anymore.
Yeah, it's awful. I would like to know from Ryan Day if spring football now being what it's turning into, are we going to get more access since there's not going to be as much real football played in the spring or less?
I can't wait for you to ask that.
I bet less if the fear is of, well, I can't actually tell. I know what Matt Rule's fear is. Matt Rule's fear is his roster getting poached. I don't know that that's Ryan Day's fear necessarily.
I mean, I think he's part of it.
Probably.
It's such a garbage excuse.
Yeah, but I understand, like, I guess Ryan Day was talking to some board of trustees or whatever and said, like, we played 16 games and we're going to be a team that probably plays 16 games a lot, stacking years on top of years. Like you have to rethink the way you do spring ball. So that makes sense to me. But I would imagine less access, less opportunity for us to go in there and say like, boy, Mylan Graham looks really good, so that some team down south can throw $2 million but
does that mean we can get more access to non-football related activities, like more opportunities to know the team and in non-competition
set up a lunch date with them or something?
Yeah, like golf outings, maybe we can go play paintball together.
Oh, that's nice.
You just want to be part of like organized team activities.
Homer Berm wants to be there. Austin, what's your third thought? Since it's third thought Tuesday for you, since
I don't know
trying to smash it all into one spot.
I didn't know if I even had a second one. I just had like a million thoughts that I unleashed all at once. I mean, I agree with all of the things that you said, and I think that both of you guys said, like except for the controversy part, I don't agree that.
It's weird. That sounds like a controversy.
Yeah, well, you've got your wish for clickbait and argument, and that's not because I don't think that Lincoln Kienholz is good enough to make that a real battle and potentially even win it. I just don't. I don't think it would be controversial no matter how this shakes out for Ohio State quarterback. I just think competitive is probably the way that I would describe it. But I mean, I think I'd like to be, even though they landed in the channel Bill Landis here, 2 tackles in the transfer portal in December, like we never really talked about that, or at least I didn't with the coaching staff, despite all of the media day activities we had before every bowl game and every playoff round. It's like, well, they're in the middle of the 2024 season in a playoff push. Well, how much time should we be spending on a recruiting class or a transfer portal class? But how they settled on these guys. And now we don't have Justin Fry to talk about some of that process for landing them, but obviously Ryan Day was going to be intimately involved in that. Do we pencil them in as starters? Is there any possibility that one could play guard or somebody else could slide out to tackle, like a Tegra Shabola or, something like that? I don't know. Like, I think that they are the linchpins of this class in the transfer portal because they're the ones that have to go out there and play and likely start. So I do think those are guys that I would like to probably get a little bit more information on that whole process and what Ohio State projects from them going into March and then beyond that.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on Thursday.
It's like, boy, you're big.
I have done that actually, but I didn't talk to him.
Yeah, Bill and I talked about that a little bit on Thursday when we were discussing maybe going a little bit too far with the assumptions that James Peoples would just be the bell cow running back and kind of eliminating the conversation around CJ Donaldson, who's rushed for 2,000 yards in his college career. And we're like, oh, he's not even going to play. Like, he's probably going to play a lot. And then there's Max Clare, who's like the best tight end in college football returning. And Ohio State added him. And it's basically been totally disregarded by everyone because it happened in the middle of the playoff push. So those guys, I mean, last year by this time, we had already spent like 12 hours talking with Will Howard and Will Kaczmarek, and we knew everything about those guys and how they fit and why they were there, and we haven't had any of that this time.
Yeah, it is weird. I do like I don't know about you guys. Like I found it a little difficult, like going through the playoff run. Like we actually got a lot of access to the team, but like I was always just asking about what was happening right in front of our faces and never like taking the time to actually ask about what was coming down the road. And now I'm regretting it a little bit.
Well, no, but you have to do that. What answer are you going to get if you ask about anything else?
Yeah.
We're focused
Fair
on
point.
the winning. We're focused on this game. That's it. So like it wasn't worth asking the questions if you know the answer you're going to get. But at the same time, here we are. It's almost March and we've never had a conversation with Max Clare yet. And that seems crazy.
It's pretty wild though that Ohio State goes out and lands the same number of players, essentially, almost exactly, out of the transfer portal. And I don't hear anyone saying that the Buckeyes bought an all-star team this offseason.
Just wait. There's enough in the news cycle right now to come back in May.
Okay. Well, I'll check back on that later. But that has been very refreshing and haven't had to worry about just insane narratives that don't match up with reality. But there will be new ones, and Berm's starting it already with the quarterbacks. But that's a month away.
So much controversy.
Yeah, you got it. We're going to be at Roosters for their grand opening in Gahanna later today, which is Tuesday. So can't wait to get back there. Talk about. I think Bobby's going to have some thoughts on Matt Patricia as well. So we'll get into more of that defensive side of the ball and coaching alignment again with those guys. Haven't seen him in a couple of weeks, but looking forward to that. And it was great to be back with Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham on the podcast daily. Thanks to those guys for holding it down while I was gone. And now you're stuck with me because I'm back again. Thanks for joining us on We'll Talk in Tuesday. We'll see you later.